You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday. We're going twice today since Thursday, just inundated with things. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's supposed to be your team every day, but it's been a hard 2 weeks with all the travel and then copious amounts of other engagements that I've had to partake in. So my apologies for that. We're going for Friday. Today we're going to do yesterday's mailbag that we didn't get to. We're going to do the preview later after I go, and we're probably going to include some snippets from the interviews that I'm going to have with some of the Fox Sports people. That's one of the reasons why we didn't have episodes as they were expected, because some of the people that we were supposed to get fell through, going and doing some in-person stuff today. And then we'll do a post-game on Friday. That'll get us to 5 on the week. But nonetheless, we are back and doing it. So Michigan Mailbag. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Holt, publisher of Wolverines Wire. Let's start with our leaders and bests. James Crudup at James Crudup 6. Do you think Michigan was saving any parts of the playbook for these next two games? I definitely think so. I think that when you look at what Michigan's schedule was, there, what would be the reason to really have some of the more the bigger plays, the things that you need to really kind of break out. You kind of saw that against Wisconsin last year. They didn't really need it against Iowa this year, right? They were able to just kind of straightforward, just go out and do what they needed to do. And then obviously those are really the big games that they had. I mean, even when you look at 2018, Michigan broke out the big plays, the different looks against Wisconsin, and going into that 3-game gauntlet. I think it's very similar, right? You go into this. Now, I don't think it's necessarily going to look. Now, I did predict Michigan's offense looks completely different. I don't think it's going to look wildly different either, even though that's what I predicted in the written predictions, because I think you still have bread and butter plays that you go out there and see, hey, does this work? But, it almost even just like what you saw with that first play from on offense against Maryland, they're going to find different ways to scheme guys open in a game like this, compared to a game like Indiana or like the first 3 games of the year. Really, when you look at some of those games, you're not necessarily going to be bringing all of your A stuff, right? You're going to save those for this game, Michigan State, which I feel like they probably, if are looking at Michigan State and saying, well, we can probably use some of those things that we might use against Michigan State or had planned to going into the year when we thought that they were going to be maybe the tougher matchup. Maybe we can use those against Penn State instead. So, yes. Josh Barr at Jadicki. Who are your top 3 coaches in the Big Ten that give off slimy used car salesman vibes? I go James Franklin and PJ Fleck, first and second easy, but I'm not sure on a third. I don't know. The Big Ten weirdly doesn't have a lot of that. As far as that, Franklin, how I like James Franklin and the interactions that I've had with him one-on-one. I think he's not nearly as bad as a lot of people give him credit for. It seems like that is kind of what he is. But I mean, and I like PJ Fleck too. So, but I have to agree, those two are probably 1 and 2. Number 3, it's a little hard because this isn't a conference that's got a ton of sleeves in it. I guess Brett Bielema would be the next one. I could just see him being kind of more of that. Hey, you're gonna want to get into that Chevy, I don't know. Brett Bielema would be the closest, but there's really nothing. P.S. You were right last week on the 300-yard game prediction. Do you think over or under last week's total versus Penn State? The Penn State's pass defense is tougher, despite it being ranked way below what a lot of people say. Because like we went through that the other day, when you look at what they actually allow on a yard per play basis, it's difficult to predict. That said, I do think JJ will end up having another 300-yard game, in part because I think he'll connect on some of the long ones. So I think Michigan will do a good enough job finding a way to make it so they can get one of those long ones, or 1 or 2 of those long ones. I think they need that. My brother in metal, Michael Wolf at MWolf21. With Michigan continuing its first drive success, would you take the opening kickoff versus Penn State or defer? Is this a bigger test for Michigan or for Penn State? I think it's a bigger test for Penn State because James Franklin's even worse in his against top 10 teams. Really bad on the road in top 10 against against any ranked opponent. And generally doesn't win at Michigan. The only time that James Franklin's won in Ann Arbor was in the COVID year, as when Michigan had a bunch of injuries and stuff like that. So, I mean, keeping in mind in that game, only a half a Cade McNamara. Joe Milton played, but he was injured. No Aiden, no Quiddy. No, I think Jalen Mayfield, did he play for like a half, I think? No Ryan Hayes. I mean, it was just no Zach Charbonnet. There were a lot of guys out for Michigan. And I know Clifford was out and Will Levis was in, but as far as the first drive success, I would still defer. You want to see what your defense can do. I think that's more of an on the road thing. Go ahead and take it and go with it. But I think like you're gonna get the crowd. Like they don't have to worry about getting the crowd riled. You know what I mean? Jimmy Whitner at Jimmy Whitner 1 over under Blake 115 against Penn State. I'll go over. I mean I think it's going to be hard fought, but I think he'll get there. Number 2, what position will you be watching closest on Saturday? Probably Michigan's linebackers. Really just Michigan's front 7. You know what? Honestly, just Michigan's defense. It's just the entire Michigan defense. What will Fred Jackson stepping in for Mike Hart mean on Saturday? I don't think it necessarily means anything. I mean, he's a guy. I don't think it's going to be any different. I just think it's going to be exactly what it is. I mean, he's been around. Like, it would be one thing if Fred Jackson hadn't been around the program this year and maybe didn't have a good feel for what the rotations are situationally and all that kind of stuff. But I think that obviously his track record at Michigan mixed with the fact that he's been around the program, I think that it's going to be the same. What uniform do you want to see on Saturday? I want a Maze jersey and blue pants. No, you do not. If it's a Maze out, you want to make it harder for JJ to see his receivers downfield? Come on. No, I want all blue. You should want all blue. The Maze should not be worn in a Maze out. That's just for, you don't want to complicate factors that much for JJ McCarthy. KRTF Farmer 84 missed last week due to salmon fishing. Michigan line play on which side of the ball will determine the outcome against Penn State. The defensive line. I think way more the defensive line, Michigan's defensive line. Because if you make Sean Clifford uncomfortable and contain the run game, it's game over. Michigan has enough weapons to punish Penn State's defensive front. And I think that Michigan's offensive line will be up to the challenge anyway. So, but yeah, I think it's the defensive front. If Sean Clifford, they can't get pressure on Sean Clifford or they can run the ball, it's going to be a long day. Jonathan Joseph at 2156, closing us out in segment 1. I know every league has their issues, but will the Big Ten ever truly look at their officiating and try to fix it? You had a nationally televised game where even the people calling the game saying they were struggling. I mean, I do think they try to fix it on a weekly basis. And yeah, that was a pretty, I didn't rewatch the game like I normally do. That did not feel like a game I wanted to rewatch. But I mean, we all felt like that was a struggle fest from the refs. It's I think that, like Michigan will submit all of their stuff. We've seen other leagues suspend teams. I don't know that would be warranted here, but I mean, it was bad. It was not a good showing by that officiating crew at all. All right, we are going to continue on. We've got way too many questions to answer, so we will get to that here momentarily. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as we get into the Victor's Valiant, I mean, this section is ballooned into a giant. I mean, there's like 20 questions in here. Let's start with Jim in the North. If Corum stays healthy, do you think he has a shot at the Heisman? I do, but I don't think he'll. I think it would take him continuing. He has to do what he's done thus far, basically every week. And then you need to have some of the other favorites, whether it's CJ Stroud or Hendon Hooker, have some slip-ups. And Corum needs a Heisman moment. I think that would be, and it could come in a game like this. Like if it's a situation where, it's a tie game or Michigan's down by half a score or something like that, and Corum breaks a long one to win it and, breaks a few tackles in the process, then yeah, I think that he could very well be there. I'm getting tired of all the flags. There's too many rules in college football. Should the Big Ten use some of its money to hire full-time refs? I don't know about too many rules, probably. As far as the Big Ten using some of its money to hire full-time refs, 100%. I think it's ridiculous that isn't a thing. It's absurd that it's not a thing. I mean, the fact that it took the NFL until recently to make that a thing as well, like, come on. How do you compare the offense this year with the one last year at this time? I think this offense is clearly far ahead of where it was last year. It doesn't necessarily feel like it. It still feels like it's kind of in a similar place where it feels like it's somewhat exploratory in some ways. But I think the passing game is clearly, at least you have some set things, but it still feels like it's like they're in discovery mode. And that's to this time last year, right? It doesn't feel like it did like against Maryland, Ohio State, and Iowa. The offense felt like it was humming. It doesn't feel like it's there yet, of course. All right. My apologies first and foremost to Mark Z at Mark Zimke, because I told him I missed his question last week. I told him I was going to do it as a whole segment this week, and I didn't have as many podcasts as I anticipated earlier. So we just included it all here. 2 questions here. What's your opinion on the reward of playing young players and backups early on defense versus the risk of making it a closer game and appearing worse statistically? The reward is, what my opinion is that I think it's worth it. You just have to pick and choose your spots, right? Because when you are able to work guys in the way that Michigan does, maybe you get a guy more ready like Rod Moore to play down the stretch. You know what I mean? And I think that's what they're trying to do with a guy like Jimmy Rolder. They feel like we're missing something at linebacker. And I know people are looking at him and saying, oh, he's going in, but he's not necessarily playing great. I mean, that's expected. He's a true freshman. He came in, he was a late enrollee. He wasn't a mid-year. So I think that's somewhat to be expected. So it's just a matter of getting him to the point where it's like eventually, you hope that you get halfway through the season, which is where Michigan is now. But, things start to click, everything starts to make sense. The game starts to slow down. So I think it's a decent situation. And yes, it might make for a closer game. It might make things look a little bit worse as things slip by. You look at Iowa, for instance, with them being able to complete the late touchdown, and people are like, ooh, close against Iowa. It wasn't close against Iowa, right? And that's fine. Michigan knows that. Other coaches know that. It's just some media people who are looking at box scores, maybe that don't know that. So continuing, after the last 6 weeks of very bland play calling, doesn't it feel like Michigan will pull an Inigo Montoya and say, I know something you don't know, I am not left-handed, and really open things up versus better competition? I do think that'll be the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if it takes them a while before they start to do that, because I think that they'll start to see, they'll probably first try to see if their base stuff works. If this was on the road at Penn State, I think that they would go for it right away, but being at home, I think they'll try to see, like, okay, does our base stuff work? Can we get through that? And then when it's like, oh, it doesn't, or it does, then they'll plan accordingly from there. But good call. I don't know what my dog is chewing on, but she is chewing on something. Adam Casel at Adam_Casel. What's better, using a good play against an inferior opponent so a quality opponent is ready for it, or building a tendency week after week and then hitting a counter when a quality team isn't expecting? Joel Klatt is the best in the biz. Is that why fans are taking his analysis as gospel truth in regards to his statement about Michigan tipping their plays with motion? I mean, Michigan swears that they know what they're doing. So I think that obviously they're doing the latter. And they're There's others that have been out there that have charted every play. Obviously, I wasn't charting plays. You can, all that kind of stuff. But that said, it isn't nearly as blatant as Joel has made it sound. And, obviously, Joel's a friend of this program. Nothing but love for him. But I think that it's probably obviously better to hit the counter, unless it's just one of those things like Ohio State under Urban Meyer made a living of, we are going to, we are going to have unstoppable plays you're going to see all the time, but we're just so good at them, you're not going to be able to stop them. There's something to be said about that as well. But I think with a lot of things, yes, I think Michigan was setting up a lot of different things, and we've seen Jim Harbaugh do that in the past. Lots of things for other coaches to think about, and then set things up from there and do something different. It hasn't been as emphatic as you would hope, but, we'll see. Zan at Zanland, is there an O-line left on the schedule that grades out better than Michigan's D-line? Maybe Ohio State. Ohio State's offensive line has been pretty good thus far. Let me see if I can pull up the premium stats here real fast. As far as pass blocking, Ohio State is 19th. Let me refresh this just to make sure that it's not on an old. And yeah, it signed me out of PFF. Okay, let's try that again. Ohio. Well, according to PFF, Michigan State's pass blocking is 81.6, which is number 7 in the country. I don't know if I buy that, but Ohio State's 25th. Run blocking, Ohio State is, Michigan State is 8th, 79, and Ohio State's 7th at 80.1. Again, I don't know if I buy that Michigan State being up there. Like, they have not been able to do a heck of a lot, but maybe I'm just, I haven't gotten to see a lot recently of them. Had to listen on the radio of the last half of Ohio State, Michigan State, for instance. I don't know that there is. I think honestly the best two offensive lines they'll have faced all year are Maryland and Ohio State. Penn State might be right there to some degree. As far as run blocking is concerned, I mean, top 50, no Penn State as far as PFF is concerned. Pass blocking, Penn State, not top 50 as far as PFF is concerned. So if we wanted to find them, they're 53rd in pass blocking, and in run blocking, they're 80th. So that, again, maybe speaks to the quality of their backs, or when you talk about Michigan State, the ill quality of their backs, so to speak. All right, Jacob Chaveria, Jacob17213950. Thoughts on Cade's dad responding to reports and rumors of him transferring on Twitter? I think that, listen, no one doesn't think Cade won't transfer at this point, right? I'm not going to mention the name of the person who isn't around the program, but he has had sources from time to time, but sometimes I can tell you with a fact has misinterpreted. So what some sources have said, me and that person have gotten in arguments about it before. So, and he's a Michigan State fan too. What's the point of putting it out there? Number one. Number two, he made it sound like Cade's done. He's not done at Michigan. And he's basically just saying the same thing that everyone expects to happen. When the season's over, he'll look to go elsewhere. So Cade's dad responding indicates that no, Cade is not done at Michigan. And if you're going to take, you can sit there and stand by your sources as much as you want. There's only one source that's better than Cade's dad, and that's Cade. And Cade probably talks to his dad, That said, I mean, the expectation would be, since he lost his starting job, he would transfer. Maybe he won't, but chances are he will. And I just think it's a weird timing thing to put out there. When you put it out there in the middle of the season, it indicates that things are done, and they clearly aren't. Once he's healthy, I'm sure he'll play. It's just a bad look. If Michigan dominates on Saturday and Bama loses, do you think we'll take the number 1 spot? No, because Georgia and Ohio State still exist. Michigan could beat Penn State 77-0, and Ohio State's on bye. Bama loses. Is Georgia on bye? I don't know if Georgia plays someone this weekend or not. Michigan still wouldn't be number one. It's just not how that's going to work. Do any players or coaches on the team listen to the podcast? I hope not. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. They do read things, like they'll read things that we put out on like Wolverines Wire. As far as listening to the podcast, I doubt it. Maybe they do, but I doubt it. I know some parents sometimes listen to the podcast, but as far as anything else, I'm not sure. All right, we got two of a similar vein here. Spencer Dewitt at Spencer Dewitt. As the stat been vanilla with play calling these first 6 games because they don't feel threatened by any opponents, and will the play calling open up this weekend? Michigan's armchair quarterback at armchair QB_UM. Do you think Michigan is developing tendencies in their offensive play calling, or is that just part of the plan, create some tendencies and break them in bigger games? Penn State and OSU. Also, who wins in a fight, Mozzie Smith or a Bear? Well, Mozzie Smith would beat Patrick Barron in a fight, so that's good enough for me. As far as the vanilla thing, and I know I addressed this, I meant to save it for these questions, but I got ahead of myself. I do think that this is, that they are kind of experimenting through some things, but I don't think that they're bringing out the necessarily A stuff, right? I don't think that I think there's a lot of stuff that Michigan did well last year we haven't seen yet this year. Looking at flea flickers, they haven't run as much counter. And I'm sure that there's a lot of action off of what they've already shown that they will do differently. I'm sure they will break a lot of those tendencies. So we'll see if they do and if Penn State's ready for it. Michigan Nate at Michigan Nate. Do you have any concern for the downfield passing attack? JJ hasn't been hitting on as many deep balls, and it seems like he's just overthrowing open guys. He isn't forcing it into tight windows. Wondering if he's having a hard time recalibrating arm strength after his injury. No, his arm strength is there. Obviously, he's overthrowing. I think he's, maybe just it feels different for him, so it's just not as precise. And no, I don't really have any concern. The last couple of weeks, they haven't even really tried. So, but that's, look at last week, 304 yards, didn't even try anything deep. That's fine. I think that there were some out there. It will be a problem if there are open shots there and he doesn't take them more than what we saw last week, if it becomes a consistent thing. And honestly, usually Michigan quarterbacks have tended to take half a season before they start hitting the deep ball. That's just how it's tended to go. So hopefully you see it this week. They're going to need it. Spencer Whitmore at Spencer Whitmore, over under 3. Why did they call that? Do you see James Franklin doing during the game? Feels like that guy can't get out of his own way during the game. I'm going to push. I think it's going to be about exactly 3. I have a hard time going either way. He did better against Purdue in a tight game there. And that's where it's like getting like really upset about, not upset about, but really feeling like, I'm scared of this game when they were in a close one with what clearly is not as good a Purdue team as it was last year. I mean, that should probably tell us something, but it was the first game of the season, so I don't know. Ricky Roscoe at Ricky Roscoe 0. Will this be Donovan Edwards' breakout game? Seems like a good time to unleash him, especially in the pass game, and him and Corum in the backfield together to keep them on their toes. I think it would be a good call, right? Like, we've been waiting for it. We've seen him make some big plays, even in the pass game. In the pass game, you could do a bunch of different things with him, and this could be the moment when we finally see all that stuff with how do you defend that, right? Put those two on the field at the same time, have Ronnie Bell and maybe have either Heading or Andrell. I mean, and then Scooney. How do you defend it? Good luck. You know what I mean? We get a couple of these, so I'll give honorable mentions because I didn't group them here in my Word document. Marissa Tinney at Lovely Marissa T. Well, we have Eric All, Roman Wilson in action on Saturday. Eric All, I mean, you can essentially expect to not see him this year, barring some kind of complete change. I wouldn't expect to see him this year based off of the things that I've been told, on top of things that others have reported. Roman Wilson, I think, is expected back. Jamie Menifee at Jamie_Menifee. I believe we unleash the pass rush sooner and more often as long as we don't give up run game chunks. Do you see us showing a lot on offense this week? Yeah. Yeah, I do. think they will. Harry Dieters at Harry Dieters, can you elaborate on this enclosure of Michigan Stadium? Hearing conflicting reports, is it enclosing the end zones, a dome? I'm so confused. Thank you. I haven't heard anything about an enclosure on Michigan Stadium. They're redoing the scoreboards. I haven't heard anything about any kind of enclosure of Michigan Stadium. I would assume that anyone saying it would be referring to the end zones, but no dome. That's not going to happen. But, that'd be more comfortable for me on the sidelines, but no dome. U of M Clips and Bolts at U of M Clips Bolts. I keep hearing news that the state game is going to be a night game, but I've also heard rumblings that it may be a noon game. Any info on this at all? I know you hate night games. It sounds like it's still going to be a night game. P.S. On a scale of 1 to 10, how pumped are you for the Dodge Ram Trucktober event? A 1, because I didn't know about it until now, and I'm not in the market for a new vehicle. I've still got Murder Bus. And, it probably needs some repairs. I think some brakes and maybe some bearings, but it's otherwise treating me really well. Perry Mitchell, at Perry Mitchell 08. Sacks are a hard stat to predict, but Mike Morris has 5 through 6 games. Since they'll be playing better teams that aren't necessarily scared of the pass rush, I think he'll have better opportunities. Does he reach double digits? I'm feeling right now he probably will reach double digits, because even in some of those ones where he didn't get a sack, he's been getting he was getting closer and closer, and I think he's starting to feel it. He's starting to understand what is needed to be able to finish. Jacob Palmer at Jacob_Palmer13. Are you watching Rings of Power on Amazon Prime? Do you like it? I did like it. I finished it early this morning, late last night. I can't believe Galadriel was Sauron after all. It's a fake spoiler for y'all. I love it. I know I went on to Reddit afterwards and saw everyone ripping it apart, the finale, and I'll look at things through the critical eye, especially considering I'm a film major. But that said, the big thing for me is, was I entertained? Yes. Were things glaringly bad at any point? No. Okay. I think it's a beautiful show. I love the lore. The only thing that concerned about is, I can't say it because it would be a spoiler. Never mind. Data Guy FL at Data Guy FL. If the opponent were the Buckeyes in the shoe on Saturday, what would your point spread? Would you favor the Buckeyes, and by how much? Yes, I would favor Ohio State right now, just because I think that they're just a little bit more set in knowing what they are. And I think that despite the fact that in retrospect, they haven't played anybody, I still think Notre Dame was at least on the same par as like Iowa. And I guess the two teams finished those games similarly, but at home, I would favor Ohio State by a touchdown right now. By the time the game comes, we'll see. Enchanted Pants at Enchanted Pants. Is it okay to bet against one's favorite team as emotional insurance against a devastating loss, or is that bad juju? Are you just betting against the spread? Which, if you're just saying that Penn State's going to cover, fine. If you're taking the Penn State money line, yeah, that's probably bad juju. You can't spend that money. You didn't, you weren't believing in your team. If you're betting against the spread, then that's fine. But, Showen at Showen_Baldman. It seems like the week the coaches are gaining confidence in JJ, week to week, that is. With Penn State having such a strong run defense, could this be the game where we pass more than run? Yeah, I think they were already kind of there anyway. I know it's kind of been more 60% run and 40% pass, but it starts out, I feel, I very much could be mistaken. I feel like Michigan starts out a lot of these games being a little bit more pass happy, looking at like last week, and then went a little bit more to the run once they finally got the things somewhat in hand, That's the way I look at it. But yeah, I think this could definitely be a more 60-40 pass type game. But they have to really stay with the run. Otherwise, they're playing into Penn State's hands. Anton Sasmita Mangala at Sasmita Mangala. Great job with my last name. You're welcome. Thank you. You're welcome. What game Saturday, aside from the Michigan game, are you most intrigued by? Easily Alabama, Tennessee, and I won't get to see much of that, but that's easily the other one there. We're about to find out if I'm using a new camera. I'm going to find out if it records over the if it records video over the 30-minute mark like the one I rented. This is a different camera. It's similar. We're finding out right now. So looks like it does. So that's good news. Ike Hamlin at Hamstand87. Can we drop the concern about Jesse Minter at this point? Any argument about inability to adjust on the fly seems to fly in the face of any same logic. I wasn't hearing anyone having concern about Minter, honestly. I have concerns about some things on defense, but it's not Jesse Minter. I mean, he seems like he's just as good as Mike McDonald. Finishing us out in segment 2, generic ERK J72, who has a better beard, you or Sharon Moore? Me, because mine's fuller. Sharon's a little close to the face. You know, it's more 5 o'clock shadow. Mine's actual beard. I mean, back when I had my beard really long, that was something. But I wasn't on video then for y'all to see. I had my beard down. If you were looking on video, I had my beard down to about here sometime during the pandemic. So that was nuts. All right. We're going to continue here momentarily, but before we do, our partners at Nissan have worked with us to create a new segment across the Locked On College Network titled Thrilling Moments, where we highlight the most exciting play from Michigan's weekend game or throughout history. This week's thrilling moment from the Michigan football team, obviously we're going to do this more on a week-to-week rather than throughout history, is going to be Blake Corum's opening run against Indiana. While it didn't end up being a touchdown, as he said it could have been, if he would have just, taken a moment and tried. But I mean, it was as Barry Sanders-esque as you can imagine. Looks dead to rights. 3 defenders, actually probably more, facing 3 defenders and some behind him. And yet he completely counters the way with an insane change of direction to go 51 yards to put Michigan on the 1-yard line right before he scored on the very next play. That was the most thrilling moment in my eyes of Michigan's game at Indiana. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at NissanUSA.com. All right. I like that I can use this other camera. I don't think the quality is quite as good as the other one, because this one's a crop sensor compared to the other one being full frame. But you know what? Works for being able to do the longer mailbags when there's 47 people. I cut out a couple questions. Some of them were like, where does Up North start? And then there's a bunch from Patrick Barron. Got to give the shout out to Jake Butt, who asked if I believe in love, and he knows the answer on that. Anyway, let's continue on. Molyneux at Molinerd. Is Michigan going to slow down Blake Corum's carry count or just grind him into dust? Can he really survive a whole season of 30 carries a game? That's what running backs always were before, like, the last, 7-8 years. When Michigan was doing a more by committee approach, like everyone does now, like when, Jim Harbaugh came and they started doing it kind of a little bit more by committee, and everyone's like, oh, wow, that's new. Most running backs were carrying 30 carries a game. Mike Hart carried more like 30 carries a game. I think that they'll probably have him do a little bit less as Donovan Edwards gets into a flow a little bit more. But, if it's working and Blake's fine, they're going to keep doing it. It's old school college football, NFL style football. Clark at Mark _ Greenlease. I was doing that right. Do you expect Franklin to pull out all the stops like they did last year with fakes on special teams and going for it on 4th downs more often? Or do you think he holds back just a bit with OSU still on the schedule? I think that's an interesting question, and I would imagine he'll want to hold back a little bit, but you got to, usually they play Ohio State before they play Michigan. So this one they might pull out all the stops now, but maybe, I don't know. He's a befuddling coach to me. Todd at Toddy Brown Jr. Is Penn State's run defense actually good, or is it just skewed because the teams they've played are just very pass-heavy offenses besides Northwestern and Auburn, who just suck? And I kept this up here just to take a look. They're number 5 in rush defense. Let's take a look at who what rushing offenses that Penn State has played. So we'll do this together because I didn't do it in here. Purdue is 103rd in the country. Not good at all, really. As far as what Purdue has done, the best rushing game they had was against Indiana State. And then that was the only one where they cleared 200. Next closest one was Florida Atlantic. And they actually got a pretty decent yards per carry against Minnesota, which is shocking in the win that they had there. But generally, Purdue, not really a very good team as far as that is concerned. I don't remember who Penn State played in week 2. It wasn't Central Michigan yet. Who was it? Oh, it was Ohio. That's right. So Ohio, their rushing offense, 111th. So right in that same category. So then you look in the fact that they played also Central Michigan, 97th. Auburn, where's Auburn? Auburn 75th. That's a little worse than middling. And then I think that's it, right? That's all the teams they played. So, I mean, that certainly could be part of it. They haven't played a good rushing offense yet. Now, Michigan, where does Michigan rank? 19th. So, easily going to be the hardest test for that front. I still think it is a good rushing defense. But how good? I'm not really sure. C. Henry at CHen313. How did Harbaugh let Kalen and Kobe King get away? They were studs at Cass Tech. How did that happen? Cass Tech used to be a Michigan stronghold. I just don't think they recruited him well enough, honestly. I think sometimes Michigan gets this, they think they take Michigan for granted as a state sometimes, and I think that's kind of what happened there. And I know they wanted them, but I don't think that they made them as bigger priorities as they should have. And, that's when other teams can get that stronghold. Aaron, the 2-year-old at heart, at Little Aaron Forever. What's your prediction for the game? I'm cautiously optimistic about this one. Go Blue. I predicted Michigan to win, what did I say? 24-17. 24-17. Ross Wank at Ross Wank. Is Eric all practicing with the team in drills, etc., or is it only taking part in strength and conditioning? I don't know what he's taking part of at all. I don't think he's participating at all as far as actually practicing. But I haven't asked those questions because I've basically been told we're not going to see him again this year. AP at Aaron Porter Jr. I'm pretty confident Michigan will win this game, but if they were to lose, where do you see Penn State having success against Michigan offensively or defensively? Keeping Michigan off kilter enough, making their offense looks like Maryland's did in the first half. Where it's they're able to run enough, they're able to get downfield. Let's just say Michigan doesn't get pressure. That's probably the big part. And then they're also able to run against Michigan, and they get a couple early touchdowns, and then Michigan just can't seem to get the offense going against a tough defense. That would be it. I don't foresee that happening, but that's kind of what I envision in my mind as far as what that would look like. Andy Cap at Andy Cap 1846. Why isn't Michigan's success of making the college football playoff paid off in the 2023 recruiting? They are on pace for the worst recruiting class under Harbaugh. Kind of odd, no? I think it's a mixture between not taking advantage of NIL and things like Jim Harbaugh flirting with the NFL and not communicating enough with some of their top players. And I mean, it's still early. And I know there's some that sit there and say, no, it's basically over. I mean, they still have some. It's not early. Sorry, I shouldn't say it's early. There's still several top targets of theirs that are out there. So it's disappointing. They certainly. I know there's frustration in that building, but I think the other big part is losing Courtney Morgan. I think that is a huge piece of it, and it's bad on Michigan for losing him. Finishing us out altogether in a first of 2 Friday episodes. Van Ebert at Van Ebert 3. If JJ and Blake were a Game of Thrones duo, would they be Tyrion and Bronn, or Tyrion and Pod, or Arya and the Hound? I think it's more Tyrion and Bronn. Pod wasn't like because both of them could, got the smart guy and the killer. Tyrion and Pod was just more smart guys Arya and the Hound were kind of enemies, but also partners in crime. I'm just going to go with Tyrion and Bronn. Bronn, who looks like Mike Zordich. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. We'll be back with another episode somewhere in the 4, 5, 6 o'clock region. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will talk to you again then. Peace.